Hey guys, on this video I will be talking about the finale of Perry Mason Season 1, so it's Episode 8, Chapter 8 from HBO. And it's a solid finale, I think. I don't think it's anything really special. It feels like one of those finales where they weren't really sure if they would come back for a second season when they did it, because it's only the last few weeks the show has been renewed for season 2. So I think obviously they had the 8 episodes for the original run completed a while back. So it feels like that kind of finale where everything is tied up quite nicely. It obviously sets the table for more, because moving forward Perry Mason is a qualified lawyer, and we get little character beats where he obviously has his team together now. We have Della, who in this episode expresses that she wants to be a lawyer. She expects to be a part of Mason's team. She expects him to put her through law school, basically. So we have quite a nice little feminist sort of beat going on with Della. At one point she gets really offended by something Mason says, and quite rightly, because he knows about her being a lesbian, about her having a relationship. I forget the name of the partner now, but of course she's been helping them out. She's agreed to put Emily up and what have you, but yeah, at one point Mason does really cross a line. He's really offensive towards Della when it comes to accusing her of making it a woman sort of issue. Her ambition, I guess, desire to help Emily, and he does make a really offensive remark, which she sort of hits back at. But I've really enjoyed the Della character, actually. I think you really see this sort of female character as someone who has to shoulder a lot of crap from the men around her, and just has to take it because that's sort of the era. But at the same time, she does have a sharp wit to her. She does have a strong personality, and does like to stand up to the men as well, and in a way she lets her work do the talking, which is the most impressive thing. But we see by the end of the episode, then her and Mason have respect for each other. Then she wants to be a lawyer. She says she'll work for him, but that she demands that he fund her through law school, which obviously he kind of agrees to do. And there's certain just character beats setting up a team moving forward for the next season. Obviously Drake is on board for the future. We see Peter move on because he actually starts working for the new district attorney, because of course the guy who's played by Justin Kirk out of Weeds, he's obviously the one being given Mason legal advice, and his whole angle was that he wanted to help Mason win the case, because then he had his eyes on the district attorney's office. So I'll talk about the case in a minute, but what basically happens is, after the case is settled and he does in fact get that job as district attorney, Peter, showing his ambition, I guess, says, I want to go and work for him. And they go after the church and all the financial sort of dodgy dealings of the church. So in some ways it's a really solid episode, but not a lot happens. It's not one of those great emotional climax type episodes. It's not an episode that's really gonna have you walking away go, oh my god, that was really something. There's very little surprises, I'd say, and that includes the case. I sort of thought there might be some big revelation with the case, but there really wasn't. Now Sister Alice is hardly in this episode. Of course she ran off dramatically at the end of the last episode when the baby mysteriously appeared on the road, and her mother was claiming, oh my god, it's a miracle. Sister Alice has brought it back to life. And at the time, I wasn't sure how to read the reaction, but I think having like watched it last night, the finale and that, and the way Sister Alice, the few times you see her, I'll talk about her in a few minutes, but it's kind of, I think she obviously realised something was fishy, and because she knows that she's not a miracle worker, although she won't admit it, but she does know it. So yeah, I think she was obviously stunned, like maybe she wasn't in on whatever was going on. So I think that's why she ran away, because she was kind of so sort of taken aback. Because it's almost that she's an interesting character, so murky in the sense that while she's in control and it's kind of her scheme and she's sort of using that power, then she was fine to keep up the ruse. But when it was someone else, and I guess maybe it just hit home to her when the baby showed up, and it's like, okay, what are we doing now? And it just, something just struck in her. So she's barely in the episode. You see her late on in the episode. I do like actually the sort of opening with Perry Mason in the episode, because what happens is we get a courtroom scene, and it's him with Joe Ellis on the stand and going after Ellis, and you only realise afterwards then it's actually like a fantasy scene, or it's a potential scene, and it cuts to like the day before, and it's Mason, Della, and the Justin Kirk character, the one something Burger his name is, giving them advice, and it's actually Mason wrestling with what the best strategy would be. So it starts off and you think this is actually a courtroom scene where he's like really grilling Ellis. He's obviously like pointing out all these kind of shady dealings and suspicious sort of circumstances. And then at one point, Berger stands up in the court, and this is the first sign that the scene is obviously what's going on. I know they've done some like really dramatic kind of wacky stuff, but even so, for him to like randomly stand up in the court and start talking to Mason, because he says he's not going to confess to it, and Mason eventually shouts back, then I'll get him to, sort of thing, or something along. And then it cuts to the actual scene in the house where they're going over strategy and they're actually debating what the best strategy is. Mason is determined to put Ellis on the stand because he thinks he's got enough and he might be able to get him to slip or to get him to confess. But both Della and Berger are saying that's not the best course. We don't really have enough concrete evidence, and he's probably just going to stand firm just because, hey, he's not going to give up information that easily that incriminates him, especially if there's nothing concrete. So Della is determined to put Emily on the stand. And there's obviously a worry that she's not ready, she's too emotionally concerned. But Della says that is the best strategy. I've been talking with Emily, I think she is ready. And I think she may be our best shot of getting across to the jury. And that's when you kind of have the stuff with Della and Mason where he makes those kind of sexist remarks. And it's testament to Della, because she stands firm and says, well, I'm going to type up those questions anyway, so in the morning if you change your mind, they're there. So she really kind of knows how to deal with Mason, and obviously no surprise they actually do go with Emily on the stand. And it's the actress from Glow who plays Sheila, and she's been doing a really good job in this series. So she stands up quite firmly on the stand, and what happens is she, obviously when Mason's questioning her, he allows her more leeway, and she paints this picture how on the night in question she was distracted by George by a telephone call. She says they talked for an hour, and it's during that time that the baby was taken. Charlie was taken away. So she kind of paints this logical pattern. Then George did it to distract her so they could steal the baby. And she also paints this picture of abuse in the marriage with her husband, where she says he was hardly ever at home, and when he was abusive towards me. He didn't treat me very well. So kind of sort of justifying the affair with George. And then she's obviously crossed the salmon by the district attorney, who's really harsh, really goes in for the kill with her. But he keeps it quite simple. He simply sort of golds her into saying, if not for your actions, Charlie would still be here. He wouldn't have been taken. So basically saying, if you hadn't had the affair with George, none of this would have happened. It's very basic stuff, because he's basically saying, because you allowed yourself to talk on the phone for an hour, you took your eye off your son, and that's when he was stolen, which, is kind of a bit weak as an argument, but I guess that is literally what happened, or at least what we meant to believe is what happened by Emily's statement. So there is that, and I think that definitely casts some shadow on her, but she does come off quite well on the stand. I think she does hold her own pretty well and comes across quite sympathetic. And as we've seen in this show, there's all these antics in the courtroom. There's like a sort of a square up between Ellis and Mason outside. And it comes down to the verdict, and the verdict is basically that it's a hung jury. It's a deadlock, that they can't come to a decision or a definitive decision. And that's it. That it's a mistrial, so there's big celebration on the Mason team because, of course, for the time being at least, Emily is in the clear. They couldn't convict her. Now the district attorney says, "Don't worry, we'll be calling another trial," but that's sort of the last we heard of it. And I think because he then steps down as district attorney later, and there is a lot of heat on his side of things, then I think we're meant to assume that it never goes to another trial. And so I think that's what I meant about there's no real revelations, because I think as viewers who are like meant to be sympathetic to Emily and her side of things and the Perry Mason side, then I think we're meant to assume that the narrative they put out there is what actually happened, and that is that the church kidnapped Charlie, and they did it for the money, and obviously because George had ties to the church, he was in on it. So I think we're meant to believe that without it obviously actually being confirmed one way or the other. I think we're certainly meant to believe that Emily is innocent. So there's that, and obviously, as I said, there's all this stuff going on. Drake steps down from the police force. He's now obviously going to work with Mason full time. He can't work for the police force anymore. And there's certain things tied up. So, for example, Joe is killed by, his superior and some other guys because he's just bringing too much shame, too much suspicion onto the police force. And the guy who's always said, "I'll always look after your wife and kid or kids." So they kill off Joe because he's just causing them sort of too much trouble. And there's various things tied up. Now, obviously, the sort of twist in this with the Emily character is the fact that obviously we now have supposedly Charlie brought back to life. And it was a bit strange because that seemed to be happening at the same time as the case was going on. So Emma, it seemed to be last week. So I just didn't get the series of events. I would have thought this supposed miracle and Charlie being alive would have filtered through, and it would have and it would have changed the narrative of the case. I thought there was press there, but I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't quite. Maybe it was meant to be in another place. Because then they took the baby, and yeah, there was a whole thing. So what basically happens is Emily then goes into the fold, goes to see Sister Alice's mother and the baby, because she gets a note as she's leaving court. And this is one of the twists I quite like on it. It's sort of quite perverse based on what we've seen with Sister Alice, but Emily sort of becomes, well, not exactly the new Sister Alice, but that's the whole deal. Then she takes her role with the mother and the church. She starts appearing with them in public. And now what happens is it's clear then this isn't her baby, because she says he looks a bit different. He looks a bit sort of darker. Now I'm not sure if that's something to do with the sort of prostitute who died, but it's in that one line it's explained to us that this isn't her baby, this isn't Charlie. So he obviously tragically really died. So it's this whole thing with Emily where she wants a child of any kind so badly after what happened to Charlie. Then she's happy just to mother this child who isn't hers. But as I said, the bigger sort of twist with that is then with Sister Alice gone out of the picture, she does kind of take over that role. She does come into the fold, and she does start making public appearances. So I guess that's something they could do in the second season. They could show more of that with Emily, but I think maybe her plot is sort of done. And as I thought that there was going to be one more appearance of Sister Alice, and Perry Mason sort of, I'm not sure if he was looking for her or if it's just a coincidence, but he does bump into her in a diner in another town, and she looks very different. So she's obviously started a new life, and she's working as a waitress, so she's clearly done with the religious life and wants to move on. And they just have one of those funny conversations, and I guess this is a very noir sort of thing, because Mason has been wrestling with his demons all season, and although he doesn't really strike you as someone who would be interested in religion, I think just because of his demons and stuff, I think there's something about Sister Alice which has kind of drawn him in. He finds her quite charming. He finds her quite unique anyway. Someone who stands out from the typical religious type figure. And I think there's obviously been an attraction the other way as well. But they have a talk, and it's just more of that stuff where she's kind of saying, you want to believe, don't you? You want to believe in something. And they just go back and forth. I mean, it's not really a massive scene. There's nothing really that much revealed. It's just one of those scenes to kind of tie it off, where you were saying, okay, she's now done with the church. It seems she's now wants to live this other life, which you sort of can't blame her. But I think it's also just a cheeky sort of ending where it's not 100% certain what really happened with Charlie. I mean, I guess they just got another baby from somewhere. But as far as Alice, I think the way I read it is, for the sake of Perry Mason, she didn't want to see the truth. She wanted to peddle this idea that maybe she did create a miracle, maybe it is Charlie who reappeared. So it's almost like, because he says, how do you explain it? And she says, well, I did create a miracle, didn't I? The baby is here, or something like that, and then she walks away. But it's obviously one of those subtext things where they both know, hey, it's not really Charlie. But there you have it. I've enjoyed the series overall. It's been very, very good pulpy noir. Some great performances I've loved, obviously Tatiana Maslany as Sister Alice. Great casting, Matthew Rhys as Perry Mason. I think Della's been a good character. It's been fun. I've enjoyed the hammy nature of it. I've enjoyed the style. The case hasn't been amazing, but it had its moments. The case, I think it has been drawn out a bit. Maybe 6 episodes would have been better. I'm not sure it quite justified 8 episodes. Some of the politics has been quite interesting. At times it's been a bit in your face, and I think some storylines have felt a bit forced in when they weren't really. But overall, it's been a good season. I've enjoyed it. It's maybe not quite the knockout of the park type series I wanted, and I'm not sure if there would be that much to a second season. I mean, just another case. That's the other thing, actually, I didn't mention, because they do get a new case near the end of the episode with a woman that comes in. And it's some sort of like identity type case where she's claiming to be a woman who supposedly doesn't exist or supposedly is no longer around. But I don't know if that's going to be the case for the next season, or if it's just showing you that they're now open for business and they're now taking on new cases. But that's just a little bit there. But overall, I enjoyed this season. I think I'll watch season 2. I'm not sure if it's something I'll review for the channel. Probably depends, how much is going on at the time. Because overall, maybe with a Perry Mason, you're not maybe going to have too much to talk about. But we'll see what direction it goes in and what my schedule's like for when season 2 pops up. But that's Perry Mason season 1. So all 8 episodes up on the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you enjoyed it? If you've seen the old Perry Mason, how do you think this one compares? Would you be up for a season 2? Are you looking forward to season 2? Or do you think one season's enough? Let me know your overall thoughts. And the big shows keep coming from HBO, because next week at the same time it's the start of Lovecraft Country, one of their big summer shows with Jordan Peele and JJ Ambrose both involved. The trailer looked pretty promising, so I'm pretty excited for Lovecraft Country, and I will be reviewing that on the channel. Certainly giving the pilot a go. Obviously we'll see what sort of quality it is, but it certainly has a lot of potential, so I'm excited for Lovecraft Country. But yeah, thanks for listening. Once again, like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Get me up on Twitter if you have any comments or any thoughts, or just express them in the comments below. And I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.